Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Slam National Club Golfers Look Back on the Golfing Week. I'm Alex Perry, and a question I'm sure you ask yourselves on a daily basis: how much money exactly does Rory McIlroy have? Aside from a few pennies in a jar in his kitchen, no doubt, McIlroy earned £28 million last year to take his total wealth to £120 million, making him Britain's richest sports star under the age of 30. McIlroy married American publicist Erica Stoll last year in front of celebrity guests that included Coldplay frontman Chris Martin, Ed Sheeran, former boy bander Niall Horan, and 50 Shades of Grey actor Jamie Dornan, all of whom McIlroy is wealthier than. Now I know what you're thinking, McIlroy didn't even win last year, so how did he make that much money? Well, it's mainly to do with the £100 million deal he has with Nike to wear their clothing, and the £100 million deal he has with TaylorMade to play their equipment. Deals that will make Rory McIlroy around £150 million in the next decade. I mean, just imagine having that much money and playing golf and just generally being awesome at everything. Still, not as tall as me though, is he? So call it a draw. Right, you may have seen last week that Justin Thomas took over from Dustin Johnson as world number one, but it might be a short-lived stay thanks to his best mate Jordan Spieth. It won't be easy, but Spieth could head to the US Open as world number one if, and it's a big if, he wins the Byron Nelson this week and finishes in a solo second position next week at Colonial. Or he can finish in a two-way tie for fifth or better this week and then win at Colonial and still make world number one. For any other player, you'd scoff at the idea, but of course this is Jordan Spieth in his hometown this week and then just up the road next week for a tournament in which he has just finished second, first, second. And who can forget what happened after his second at Colonial last year? He went back-to-back at the Travellers and then of course that famous win at Birkdale for the Open Championship. So JT, don't get too comfortable. Speaking of the US Open, Christian DeMarco, the son of four-time PGA Tour champion Chris, had a bit of a nightmare last week at a regional qualifier. After carding a 72, he went home thinking that that was going to be nowhere near good enough to get him in, only to find out later that actually it was good enough to get him into a two-man playoff. Only, and this is the unbelievable part, the other guy had gone home as well. They couldn't find either of them. So they settled it in the only way they knew how, a coin toss. Imagine losing out on a place in one of sport's biggest events for a coin toss. Or should all sporting occasions be decided this way? 2 sets all in the final at Wimbledon, just get him playing rock, paper, scissors. Or how about if England manager Gareth Southgate couldn't decide on a final spot in his World Cup squad? Just have the two players play off at Pro Evo against each other. The coin toss idea, which DeMarco lost, sounds utterly absurd, but honestly, I can't think of any other way they could have done it. If you can think of a better way they could have done it other than getting the players back to the course, which I'm assuming they couldn't do due to timing and lighting and things like that, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And sad news coming out of the US this week. The oldest surviving Masters champion, Doug Ford, has sadly passed away at the age of 95. So I thought I would just share my favourite story with you on Ford, which I read in Golf Digest. Playing against Carrie Middlecoff in the final of the 1955 PGA Championship, then a match play tournament of course, Ford said that Middlecoff was as slow a player on the earth as there ever was. So he employed his then 10-year-old son to walk around with him carrying a chair so he could relax while Middlecoff took his time over his shots. And as American writer Kyle Porter points out on Twitter, did Doug Ford invent tour sauce? Right, what's good on nationalclubgolfer.com this week? You may have read a couple of pieces by me in previous weeks about how golf courses need shortening and how we should be playing off tees suited to our ability. Well, guest columnist Peter Race has had his say, and in fact, gender-free tees are the way forward. They will save club golf. Go and have a read of that. And how often do you spend on the driving range? Mark Townsend has written a very funny piece about the weird and wonderful characters that you only see on the driving range. I highly recommend that. And sticking with Mark Townsend, he caddied for another member of NCG staff, Tom Irwin, in the Brabazon Trophy qualifier at Fairhaven last week. They wrote it in a diary style. It's very funny, it's very dry, it's very humorous. Go and check that out. Some really good reads over on nationalclubgolfer.com. Plenty to keep you busy on this Friday afternoon. Right, that was this week's edition of The Slam. I'm Alex Perry. I'll see you next week at Wentworth. It won't be easy, but Spieth could head to the US Open as world number 1 if, and it's a big if, he wins the Brian Nelson? Who the f*** is Brian Nelson?